So I think this was taking place. This little tidbit was in the charges were pressed on this guy named David. He's was hunting in West Virginia and killed a nice, really nice buck in West Virginia. And he lived in North Carolina, and he also killed a really nice buck in North Carolina. And it sounded like to me like that was kind of the end of the story in his mind. And he, I guess, a couple months later, he got a knock on his door, and it was game wardens, and they started questioning him about his bucks, and he just kind of answered everything honestly and told them, they're at the taxidermist, and that's kind of where they left it. And they ended up coming back that day, a whole bunch of game wardens, like 2 of them from West Virginia, 2 of them from North Carolina. Yeah. And they ended up taking both his bucks from him, and really didn't tell him why or the reasons for taking them. And like all those things do, it drug out forever and ever. And he went to court for it, and then there was no evidence at all. They didn't bring any evidence to the courtroom for him. And it sounded like they delayed the court sentence like a whole bunch of times because they were trying to collect evidence on him, and ended up they just completely dropped the charges.
I think they're trying to do DNA to prove that the deer that he shot in North Carolina was from Virginia.
Yeah, I think that's what they were assuming happened. And the way the story ended up unfolding is it sounded like some people from West Virginia, where he shot that big buck, in that area, had gotten a hold of the game wardens and was complaining essentially that an out-of-stater came and shot one of their big deer. But anyways, ended up they took the cape and everything, and they must have not taken care of the capes, and both deer. Yeah, they took the capes, and then the capes got ruined and all that stuff when he got them back. And what I think, and this is kind of the conversation, the way I wanted the conversation to go, was initially whenever they took the deer from the guy, before they had any evidence or any trial or anything, they posted a picture with the game wardens holding the big racks, and essentially saying that this guy got in trouble for this, and we caught him, and here's the trophies, And do you guys think that's weird that like game wardens do that? Like I see them on the internet all the time, like showing off the big deer that they.
Some people like that because they like poachers to be shamed, but in my opinion, you better have some evidence if you're calling somebody a poacher. And they blatantly called that guy a poacher.
Yeah.
So I think there is some old school mentality. It's going away in a lot of places that are more up to date. The old school wardens used to just target people who shot trophy bucks. I mean, I got a lot of that when I was younger. But the wardens nowadays are pretty cool with you. I mean, the good thing about me is everything's video recorded. So they have a hard time pinning something on me that I didn't do.
Yeah. And Dan, I know you said in the past, like you used to get a lot of, since you were hunting so deep into these swamps and stuff, it'd take you forever to get back to the truck. And you always got like accused of shooting deer late or whatever.
Yeah.
Just because of the time it takes to get back to the vehicle. Gosh, that'd be frustrating to deal with.
Yeah. Well, some of these swamps are 3 miles across. I mean, you go out there 1.5 miles and
yeah,
it could be a long time to get to the truck.
Yeah. That kind of sounds like what this guy was running into. I don't know how I feel about that. Like I get the part where you're saying like they need to, like poachers need to be, penalized or whatever, and that's very true. But it's just kind of weird.
You go a little overboard too, though. I mean, no, I don't like poaching any more than anybody else does. But I mean, this whole pay for it based on the score of the antlers kind of thing. Poaching. You broke the same law if you shoot a spike as if you shot a 50-pointer. Poaching's poaching. They both did the same thing. I don't have any problem with it being a $15,000 fine, but it should be a $15,000 fine if it's a spike or a 15-pointer, right? A poaching one's poaching one, basically.
Yeah. I think that's all based on state. I think the state laws are different for how they deal with that kind of stuff. I mean, I get their theory on doing that, charging more for a bigger deer because it's like it would be like I don't know, it's like it's it's more of an incentive for someone to poach, but
what's interesting is I know a case where a friend of mine's niece was murdered, and they knew what apartment she was in when she disappeared, and they were pretty sure she was in there. They couldn't
Yeah.
go in there without any kind of warrant or anything, and it took them like 2 days to go and find her, and then she was murdered. And if you're a warden and you think the guy's got an extra bluegill in there, you can just walk in Wisconsin. Wardens don't
Yeah.
need any kind of search warrants or anything. They don't even have to give you a reason. They can just walk into your house at any time. And federal agents can't do that. The FBI can't do that. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I wonder what happened to make that come about where they could do that,
I think because people would hide evidence or something, before they'd get a warrant. But I mean, you think about this more serious offenses of what people could be doing. You'd think the FBI or something would have more authority than them.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I get the rules. I mean, I get why, officers and stuff don't have that authority, because I'm like everything else that would get, end up getting abused in some cases. And they're probably trying to prevent things like this from happening,
So
people
when I look at that case, I they got a trail like the people in West Virginia have a trail cam picture that looks like the buck that they claim that he shot in West Virginia. That's from North Carolina. Whether it is or not, I don't know. But it warrants investigation. What it doesn't warrant is automatic accusations and put it in a newspaper and put it on news stations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's what was weird about it, is them holding the trophies up and smiling and all that. I'm like, man. Anyway, and who knows? Like, you're probably right. There's probably a couple sides of that story too. But I just thought it was interesting.
We had a case in Waukesha County, Wisconsin, where a 14-year-old boy shot a buck in Vernon Marsh, which is a public area, and the losses at the time was at 14 he didn't have to hunt with his dad, but he had to be within sight or hearing of him, and he was within sight and hearing of his dad, but his dad was in a tree about I want to say 75 yards from him. But he shot the buck, and it dropped, and he got down, and it was a trophy buck of a lifetime for a 14-year-old kid, especially on public land. He ran over to the buck that was in the water and dragged it up onto the high ground, which is about 20 feet or something. And he was being watched with binoculars by a warden, and they confiscated his buck and put it on the wall of shame as a poached deer because he moved it before he put a tag on it.
Oh.
In Wisconsin, we have what they call the wall of shame, and every time there's a real big poached deer, they put it on that wall. And a lot of people were accusing that warden of just wanting to add another one to the wall. Where I think that would have been a good opportunity for him to just talk to the kid about how you're supposed to tag a deer and you shouldn't touch it, and until it's tagged, kind of thing. And a kid ain't gonna have that rule book memorized. I think again, that was some old school wardens, and that was probably 15 years ago. I think a lot of the wardens now are a lot better. A lot more educated about working with people, at least around here.
It reminds that story reminds me of I don't remember where I heard that. It was a different podcast or a different, but there's a guy in his hometown that killed a big giant buck like that, and he did it illegally, and now it's on one of those walls, like inside of the office, the conservation office or whatever. And he's so proud of it still that, like, when people come over, he still takes them into the office and shows them the buck or whatever, and they let him come in there and show people that buck. He's like, you got to see this thing I killed. That's funny. But anyway, someone commented, Dan, about they made a good point about, you were talking about like the different fines, and I think this guy, his name is Josh Jordan. He says he sees the need for different fines because if you shoot a doe to feed your family, let's say, that versus shooting a trophy buck for a mount, it's kind of two different ways of thinking about it. Like, yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, if the trophy deer scores 125 inches versus 200 inches, it should cost
Yeah.
more.
Right. No, I get what you're saying too.
I think that's why that's why they have a range in fines.
Yeah.
If you get a speeding ticket, it's not necessarily an exact amount. Well, maybe
Yeah.
speeding would probably be a bad example because it kind of is. But if you break a law, there's usually a range of fine because it's a judgment, based
Yeah.
on to what degree you broke that law. That's why it's up to a $10,000 fine or up to this, where I think it's up to a judge or a jury to decide that, well, this guy was killing that for trophy or versus food. So if the guy hunting for food shoots a deer, poaches a deer for food, and it just happens to have a big rack, well, then he's a that's different. He's still poaching for food. He'd still shoot the first deer he sees if he was doing it to feed his family. And I don't think really anybody's feeding their family anymore by poaching. I really think that the government handouts and everything else, I mean, there's nobody out there starving.
Right. Deer hunting Cajuns, he said we need to start chasing the fentanyl problems instead of the deer hunting problems. But I just that comment reminded me of a story. I used to work with a sheriff. He worked part-time for my dad when I was little, and then I worked for my dad too in high school. And he'd be a sheriff after in the evenings. He was the sheriff, and he came in one morning. He was just in a horrible mood, and I was like, "What's wrong with you?" And he goes, I had to deal with one of your conservation officer buddies last night. I'm like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "I hate those guys." I'm like, "What's wrong with them?" And he's like, "Here I was all night chasing around, people on drugs, or this guy beat his wife up, and I was dealing with that. And I walk into the sheriff's office, and there's John, and he has 8 bass laid out on the table, and he's measuring them out." And I said, "Here I am walking around trying to fix all these problems in this county, and this guy just took a bunch of fish away from an old man that was trying to have a good day." And he's like, I was just laughing. He goes, "Is this what you guys do all day? Is ride your boats around in your 4-wheelers and ruin people's afternoons?" Hey everybody, if you like the channel, make sure you subscribe right here. And if you like the clips, I got 2 more options for you. 2 options right here. Subscribe right here. See you guys.